Hello and welcome, dear listeners, to episode 203. At least I think it's episode 203 of the Reformed Gamers, a show all about theology, video games, and getting into a retro classic that has been wonderfully remastered and still maintains its pixels. I'm your host, Logan, and joining me is another beautiful bearded man, Aki from Aki and Peach. Man, say hello to the dear listeners.
Hello, dear listeners.
Dude, how are you doing, man?
Honestly, actually, I am tired this week. It has been, it is coming to a very busy season with my IRL job, which pays the bills. And so as a result of that and trying to do content creation and raising a family, it's been a busy week. I've been up every single night for the past 2 weeks straight, and doing work for my real life job, and then being awake during the day too. So it's starting to wear on me a little bit.
I bet, man. You definitely need to get some sleep in there.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
We all dabble with some content creation here, but I'm definitely, I don't have kids, and I think my job is definitely pretty different than what you're doing. So
sure,
stay strong, my dude. Find some
I appreciate
sleep.
it, brother. I appreciate it, man. Got to make that space,
Yeah, man. Well, speaking of kind of you and what you do, man, for some of our listeners who maybe aren't familiar with you and your community and your streams on Twitch, man, let's roll out the red carpet for you, man. Tell the dear listeners a little bit about you and what Aki and Peach is all about, and some of the things you do.
Sure. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about kind of what we do. So I primarily stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/AkiAndPeach. I stream a couple times a week with my daughter, stream a couple times a week with my wife, and we build kind of a family-oriented, family-friendly environment where we welcome conversation about difficult topics while we play all sorts of games. Lately, my daughter and I have been playing some Pokemon Unite, and she just put her very first toe in the Destiny 2 waters this week.
Oh,
and
okay.
Is obsessed, absolutely obsessed. So she is it's awesome to watch her kind of walk along this journey with us. But I'm really excited to be on this specific episode because Final Fantasy has been a big influence in my gaming life. It's a series that I absolutely love, and actually a lot of our stream theme is around Final Fantasy. We have Mithril for our channel points. We have Gil for our bot currency. Our followers are called the Warriors of Light, subscribers of the Warriors of Light army. So like we love Final Fantasy. I love Final Fantasy. So
Yeah, man. And your sub badges too are a chocobo that you
That's
grow.
Right. Yep, you
which is really cool.
That you tend to, and you take care of, and as they grow up, eventually we coat it in a suit of armor so we can ride in battle together. Actually, when I first started talking to my wife, one of the first things we ever bonded over was Final Fantasy X. Like she was really into that game, and I bought her the Final Fantasy 12 Special Edition steel case, disc, and everything. And yeah, it was all really, really good. So yeah,
that's awesome, man.
We all like Final Fantasy around here.
I remember working at GameStop when that game came out, and I remember seeing that steelbook, and that was a pretty dope steelbook.
I still have it. It's a nice steelbook. Yeah.
Oh, lucky dude! I'm a sucker for a good steelbook, and that one was a pretty nice looking one. So
it was
good pick. Well, man, I also want to highlight something too. I want to congratulate you on your Unite the Light stream, which I think I got the name right here recently with Jono and some other content creators, dude. That congratulations on that. I saw like a donation came through for like 10,000 or something.
Oh man, it was crazy, absolutely crazy. So obviously it was all benefiting Compassion International, and it was funny because at the start of our segment, I was playing with Sam Klepper, DT Pap, and Jono, and at the start of the segment, Pap was just like, when we get to $10,000, we're gonna shave our heads. So
oh
yeah,
no!
So now I got real short hair.
Oh man! Wow. Do you feel the cold of autumn a lot more now?
Oh man, it's a little breezy. It's all good. But at the end of the day, people were obedient to the Lord, and we had to be obedient in return. So it was great. We had a really successful session, and across the entire Unite the Light charity event, we raised over $30,000 to build homes for people in Haiti, which is super awesome,
man.
Yeah,
that
real
is awesome, man. Again, congrats on that. Dear listeners, in case you also didn't know, maybe you're looking at Aki here on YouTube and you're like, he looks kind of familiar. He was in that What is Your Favorite Video Game YouTube video we did several months back.
Yeah.
He was one of two people that picked Chrono Trigger. But according to him and the title of this episode, the intro music and all that stuff, we're not talking about Chrono Trigger this episode. We did that already. Go back and listen to it. We're talking about Final Fantasy IV on this episode here, mainly because the Pixel remasters came out recently, and I was looking at our back catalog of episodes and realized we've never done a solo Final Fantasy episode. We did one covering the entire series, but we didn't really cover the entire series. We just kind of talked about it. And I was like, man, I need to fix that. And what better person to kick it off with than one of the biggest Final Fantasy fans I know than Aki here as well. So I'm glad I could get him on this episode. And I think you guys are going to enjoy the conversation. I think we're going to have a lot of fun. And yeah, but without further ado, let me get into the housekeeping a little bit. A few things worthy of note before we dive into the episode is one, if you want to check out Aki and Peach's stream, you want to head out to their community, but go to their Twitch, see what they're all about, hang out with them. Links to all their stuff will be in your show notes, so be sure to check that out. And as always, new content is going up on our YouTube channel, website pretty regularly, so be sure to check the links in your show notes for the new content that we have posted, and you'll be able to check that out for yourself as well. Although I feel like at this point, the YouTube channel has just become a Metroid Dread channel because I feel like that's the only kind of content I post anymore.
Hey, listen, it's a great game though.
It's amazing. I'm surprised that it's as good as it is, and we'll have to do an episode on that here pretty soon. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into the show. So Aki, man, what's a game that you've been playing recently?
So I've been playing
a game or two.
It's funny because I've had a lot of late nights with work lately, and so actually, usually when I'm up here, if I'm waiting on a vendor or waiting on something to happen, I've been sitting here on my Switch and I've been playing ActRaiser Renaissance.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if you ever played the original ActRaiser. Actually, was a Square Enix game for the Super Nintendo way back in the day, and it was great. It's what's known as a God game, basically. Where you act as God and you are like guiding your citizens and helping them grow their communities and stuff, but it also has action elements where you go into the land and you slay evil to help your citizens progress their cities and everything. So the remaster updates everything, the graphics, the music. It's truly almost a remake, which is why I guess they call it ActRaiser Renaissance. But I've really enjoyed everything that I've played in it so far. They made a big story out of each individual segment of the game, and the music's great. It's really on point, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. So
yeah, that one's sitting on my wish list because when I saw that it was shown at I think a Nintendo Direct several weeks ago, I was like, this looks really cool. Apparently,
it came out on a Nintendo Direct, and they were just like, oh, by the way, it's released.
Yeah,
they literally announced it and dropped it on the same day. It was crazy.
Yeah, and apparently it was a bigger deal than what I thought it was because of the way that they announced it. I was like, oh, okay, it's a cool new game. And then I looked into it. I was like, no, this actually was a pretty big game back on the Super Nintendo, and they just didn't really give it much ceremony. And I'm sitting here like,
absolutely.
I feel like I should play this.
I feel like it's one of the forgotten Square Enix titles. It was because Squaresoft, actually, technically, because it was way back in those days. So I feel like it's just kind of one of those ones that people didn't necessarily really know about. But a friend of mine introduced it to me years ago, and I've loved it ever since then, especially the very first action area, Fillmore. The music, the theme is really, really, really good. So if you haven't heard it, you should look it up, and you'd be like, ooh, I want to play this because this theme is rocking.
Okay. Yeah, I'll look that up, man.
But I also recently recompleted Final Fantasy I in the Pixel Remaster series.
Oh, you finished it?
I did finish it. And it was great to play through and experience, and I am so excited to tear through the rest of the Pixel remasters. And I don't know if you saw, but I think 5 dropped today, or had its release date announced today.
No, I did not see that.
Yes, which it just came out today. I don't remember what the date is exactly, but 5 is coming very soon. And every single bit of it that I've touched so far has just been really, really nicely done. Square Enix has shown these titles a lot of love, and it's nice to see them properly updated and playable in a modern format.
Yeah. Oh man. Now I feel like I'm not going to open up Steam because I've done that before on the show where I open up Steam and then it derails the whole show. But I'll definitely look that up because 5 is one that it's one of the Final Fantasy games, or at least the classic ones, I have not played. Yeah. But I have it on my PS Vita, but I've never played it, and it's just like, I need to get around to it.
November 10th. I opened Steam for you, so it's November 10th.
Awesome. Cool. See, I like how you're keeping me accountable. You're
I
helping me
got
out
your
here.
back.
So
I got your
thanks,
back.
man. I appreciate that. So I'll keep that in mind then. November 10th, Final Fantasy V. I'll put it on my calendar.
There you go.
Was this your first time playing through Final Fantasy One, or was this kind of like a
Oh
playthrough,
no,
like a second playthrough?
absolutely. I don't know what number of playthrough it was, but
Okay.
I've beat it. I have the original NES cartridge, so
Oh wow.
I should have had that out. I should have brought it and just kind of showed it off. But anyway, I've loved Final Fantasy. The very first Final Fantasy title I ever played was Final Fantasy VII for the PC.
Okay.
Actually, with my parents, I remember bought a Voodoo 3 card to put into our Gateway 2000 PC, but this was obviously in the
Oh
90s.
man.
And a demo disc for Final Fantasy VII came with it. Had a little brief portion of the story where they were going to Mount Corel, and
Okay.
also the battle arena from the Gold Saucer. Just the battle arena. Like you couldn't go around the Gold Saucer, but you could play through the battle arena a little bit. And so that gave me my first taste of Final Fantasy. I was like, man, I really want to play this series. And we didn't have any consoles in the household, so I emulated the original Final Fantasy back in the day and played through it and really enjoyed it. And then later on, obviously, acquired the cartridge. And my first experience with Final Fantasy IV, we're going to bring this full circle here, was actually the PS1 re-release that came with Chrono
Oh wow.
Trigger. Also,
Oh, okay.
it was the
Yeah.
Final Fantasy Anthology, I think they called it, and there was a disc
Yeah.
for Chrono Trigger and a disc for Final Fantasy IV.
Oh, that is awesome.
Yep.
Man, so man, now I feel dumb for even asking like if this was your first time playing through Final Fantasy One because I'm like, wait a minute, Aki's like a tried and true Final Fantasy fan. Like,
The
oh
only,
man,
and this is going to sound really silly, one of the few Final Fantasies I haven't played through is Final Fantasy VI, and so I have a deal with my community when the Pixel
what?
Remaster drops, is we're going to do a full playthrough on
Oh
stream
man,
of Final Fantasy
dude.
VI. I've only ever made it to where the castle sinks into the sand and they're escaping from Kefka, so not very far in the
Oh
game at
dude,
all.
yeah,
Yeah,
you're like super early in the
yeah.
game.
So and I'm excited to experience it. I've heard a lot of awesome things about six, so it'll be fun.
I mean, there's a reason it's my favorite Final Fantasy, but I'll save that for another episode. I don't want to gush too much and give it all away now.
Sounds
But
good.
that's awesome, man.
Yeah, you'll have to
Well,
be there when we play it.
oh, I will. I'll try to be there as much as I can. Just real quickly, then, as far as what I've been playing, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time here because if you follow me on social media, if you've seen the website, if you've seen the YouTube content, I've been playing a whole lot of Metroid Dread to the point where that's pretty much all I played in October. So my backlog has just kind of sat there and stared at me like, "What am I, chopped liver?" And so
Right?
I haven't really played a whole lot. I've just been enjoying Metroid Dread. I've just been soaking it in. I just beat hard mode.
Oh man.
And miss the 4 hour time thing, so I didn't get to speed run it like I'd wanted to, but I'm still enjoying it, still cranking out some YouTube videos on it. I love that game. It's my game of the year right now. It's
It
just
gives me flashbacks when I would sit with my Game Boy Advance and play Metroid Fusion. Like
yes.
it takes me all the way back, you know?
Oh, dude, it's so good. Oh man, you want to talk about Metroid Dread the entire episode? Forget Final Fantasy 4.
I'm not prepped for that, man.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But yeah, no. So I've been playing that, but I did play some Final Fantasy for the Pixel remaster on the iPad leading up to this episode and getting prepared for it. I didn't get to finish it. I believe I'm at the halfway marker in the game, and I won't get into spoilers because I know people are going to be playing through the Pixel remaster, and I don't want to
Sure.
ruin anything for that. But yeah, that Pixel remaster, hot dog. It's good.
They've
It's
done a
really
really
good.
nice job. Really, really
Oh
nice
man,
job.
they should have picked a different font. I will agree with that. But
I
if you
went
buy it on Steam,
into I went into the games files, yeah, on Steam, and there's a way to change it so that the font size
mhm,
is a little bit larger, makes it a little bit easier to kind of tolerate and read, and
yeah,
that seemed to work well for me.
I
The font would be my only gripe.
so I actually picked it up for Steam last night, the night before we're recording this, and tried it. I was like, okay, I'm curious how it is on Steam. And I started playing it. Found out you could change the font. I found a way to change it to like the font that was used in Final Fantasy VI on the Super Nintendo.
Ooh,
And
okay.
so I played through it. I'm like, I'm not playing this on my iPad anymore. This is so much better on Steam. Like,
Yeah,
oh man. But other than that, really well done. Really
absolutely.
well done. But so with that, let's just get into it. Real quick reminder to those of you listening to the show or watching on YouTube to leave a rating and review of the show on iTunes, Podchaser, whatever podcast app you use. Helps go a long way in just kind of boosting the show and its algorithm. Well, not an algorithm, but boosting it in the leaderboards and all that jazz on the different podcast places. But let's get into it, man. Final Fantasy IV. I'm going to read this little synopsis thing here as we get into it. It says it's the fourth installment in the long-running Final Fantasy series, which is ironic because it's kind of an ongoing
Back
joke.
in the day, it was the second installment, right? No, I'm just
yeah, we're gonna get into that a little bit.
Okay, all right,
That's something I learned in prep for this show.
Yeah.
But it introduced us to a hero who did a great evil that is part of the game's overall struggle. In 1991, Square released a game that was not only fun, but had us asking questions about redemption and just how far someone can go before they can be forgiven. Hailed as one of the best Final Fantasy games and JRPGs of all time, join us as we discuss Final Fantasy IV. Now, Aki, you're going to have to correct me here because I may not. This plot synopsis, I try to keep it as bare as possible, but still give enough info to let people be like, oh snap, this sounds interesting, I want to try it. So if I leave anything out or if I'm about to spoil something, you need to just be like, Logan, stop, nope, you're done, or add something in.
I mean, reads like the back of a video game box. So
I guess it's not bad. I guess it does. All right, fair enough. So plot synopsis for this game is Final Fantasy IV opens with Cecil dealing with the ramifications of orders he received from the King of Baron to steal the water crystal from Mysidia and remove any obstacles. Basically just means kill anyone that gets in the way.
Yep.
Cecil shows major remorse over this action, which is used against him as the king doubts him upon his return. And to prove his loyalty, Cecil is tasked with delivering a bomb ring to a nearby village with his brother in arms.
One thing I will clarify, he doesn't know it's a bomb ring. He doesn't know he's carrying a bomb ring.
Did they not say it in the game?
Nope. Well, I mean, they do when he gets to the village.
Oh, snap. Well, anyway, there you go. Deliver a ring that that is oddly shaped.
It's like a signet. He's like, deliver this signet to these people. And I'm like,
so Cecil's tasked with delivering a signet to the nearby village with his brother-in-arms, Kane, who is a dope-looking dragoon warrior. I love the armor in this game. As they set out on their journey and through a series of events, an evil plot to steal the crystals of the land is unearthed, along with a mysterious dark knight named Golbez begins to wreak havoc across the land and cause problems for Cecil and the gang. And I kind of put it in parentheses here that I would go into more detail, but I'd be spoiling some stuff if I did.
Absolutely.
So I'm not going to go into it. Dear listeners, as we get into this episode, as always, in case you're new to the show, first of all, thank you for checking out this episode. Second of all, we typically do spoiler warnings before we get into spoiler territory on the show. So you can listen up to a point, and then if you don't want the game spoiled, you can pause the show, or if you don't really care, you can just keep listening. Or if you played the game before, you can join us as we reminisce. So let's get into some development history, some Twitter responses, and then our impressions of the game. Now, this is where I learned a lot about the game, researching this a little bit, and I was like, oh man, this is pretty cool. So shortly after completing Final Fantasy III in 1990, Square was actually going to make two different Final Fantasy games, one for the NES and one for the SNES. The NES game was originally going to be Final Fantasy IV, and the Super Nintendo game was going to be Final Fantasy V. But because of financial issues, scheduling issues, it caused them to scrap the NES title, focus solely on the Super Nintendo title, and rename it Final Fantasy IV. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting tidbit.
It's kind of interesting to compare that to even modern game development, right? Because we've seen games that have been announced and cross video game generations, right? And so this is the first example, well, maybe not the first one, but one of the earliest examples of a game being scrapped in favor of just saying, we're going to make this game for this platform, and that's it.
Yep. Man, that's good. I didn't even think about that. But yeah, you do have some examples like with Breath of the Wild kind of doing that.
Absolutely.
And then even now games with like going to PS5, Xbox Series X, they're scrapping the previous gens to focus on the new ones. I think Deathloop was the most recent one I can think of that did that. And I think Resident Evil, I'm not going to get into that. But no, that's cool. Let me continue on here. Takashi Tokita?
We'll go with it.
Hard.
Sounds
we'll go
good.
with it. Takashi Tokita was the lead designer, marking this as his first project at Square. And he worked on Final Fantasy IV. Man, what a mad lad. Designer of Final Fantasy III, Hiromichi Tanaka, was working on the project, but actually later left when the direction of the combat design was going more towards featuring a separate battle screen, relying on menus. He wanted it to be more like Secret of Mana, which is actually what he left to go work on instead of this, because he wanted to just be more like action oriented and action packed. And so that's kind of what he did. Fun fact about this game, the development team for Final Fantasy IV consisted of 14 people, and the game finished development in around a 1 year's time.
Compare that to the modern video game release, modern AAA video game release. How long has Final Fantasy 16 been in development so far?
Well, I don't know. I know it's been a while.
Probably. And when is it releasing?
Dude, what's the one with Noctis? Is that 15?
That's 50. Oh man, I remember when that was Final Fantasy Versus 13.
Yes,
I had a MySpace profile that was all decked out in like Noctis stuff back in the day. I'm showing my age here a little bit, but
yeah, that was a long. I remember that
long
one being
time
for a long
ago.
time.
Man,
MySpace profile.
Oh
dude.
Yeah, dude, you remember it? Because you could actually, not unlike Facebook, where it's everybody has the same. This is how your thing looks. MySpace, you could make it custom, man. MySpace and Zanga or whatever, Zanga, whatever, and like all of these old sites where you could you could impress your personality upon these things. You can't do that anymore.
And you could rank your friends on MySpace in your top 8, and then
everybody would fight.
Everybody would get mad at you, and then try to compete.
People would do people things.
People would do people things that yes. Oh man, I love it. Y'all, another fun fact about the game is that the ATB system, better known as the Active Time Battle system, was designed by Hiroyuki Ito after he watched a Formula One race and received inspiration from watching the racers pass each other at different speeds.
Which is crazy because that became a staple of not just Final Fantasy, but several other like JRPG titles after that.
Which is nuts. Yeah, I think Chrono Trigger was another one that I can think of. But
absolutely,
man, it's crazy how creative people find inspiration in some of the most random of things.
Mm-hmm.
But another fun fact is that the game script had to be reduced to 1/4 of its original length because of cartridge storage limitations.
Oh my goodness.
Can you imagine if we got a director's cut of Final Fantasy IV, what that would be like?
To be fair, the after years, which came relatively recently,
yeah. That's true.
It was not that great compared to Final Fantasy IV. So maybe it's good we got what we got. Maybe it's good there were limitations. Yeah. It just kept the good stuff,
We just got all the good stuff. That's, you know what? Yeah, we'll leave it there. The game soundtrack was, of course, written by longtime series composer Nobuo Uematsu, who's just
Mozart of video game music.
He really hits it out of the park with just about any kind of, not just about any kind of soundtrack he composes. It's good stuff. Now, some of you, and this is where, Aki kind of hinted at this earlier with Final Fantasy 2. Some of you may actually better know Final Fantasy 4 as Final Fantasy 2, and that's because the previous 2 installments of the games had not been localized and released in North America at the time of its release. So to maintain continuity, the game was renumbered, which I didn't know that until I was prepping for this episode. I was like,
to confuse an entire generation, they decided to name it Final Fantasy 2.
Well, this is just like is it Final Fantasy 6 is actually Final Fantasy 3 when it was released over here?
Actually, if you have the SNES Mini, which I do have, it boots up as Final Fantasy 3.
That's right, it does.
Which is crazy.
So, thanks, Square, and your numbering conventions.
They even use Roman numerals to begin with, which is already confusing for some people. But then you're going to go and just name 6 is 3 and 4 is 2 and 5 and 2 and 3 don't actually exist. Anyway. You think words are hard? Let's go with numbers.
I know, right? This is almost like getting into Star Wars territory with how they went back and forth between the trilogies and all that. But another fun fact is the game was actually made easier for North American audiences to allow new Final Fantasy players a lower barrier of entry if they had not played the previous 2 entries. So that explains why the game feels a little bit easier.
Yep.
But the game was also released. The game was originally released on July 19th, 1991 to critical acclaim. Nintendo Power stating it set a new standard of excellence. The game has been ported onto multiple consoles. It's received almost like a sequel expansion sort of thing with the after years, which that'll be a later episode that we cover that. But you can just about play this thing on just about anything nowadays.
Absolutely.
Is what it feels like, especially now with the Pixel remasters. You can play it on Steam. You can play it on iOS. I would recommend you play it on Steam because
play it on your Android. You can play any mobile device. You can play it on.
Yep,
which is crazy.
Yep. So if you have a mobile device or Android, iOS, whatever, you have access to this game and you can play it, and it's really, really good. I sent out a tweet earlier, just kind of getting some responses to see kind of what people thought if they played the game. Ryan Craig from wait, why did I say from? Ryan Craig from Final. Or wow, I can't talk. I'm messing up here.
Words are hard.
Aki, can you read Ryan's response with what he
Sure,
wrote us?
I can. It says Final Fantasy II for the Super Nintendo is one of my all-time favorite games. I played it at the same time as my best friend, and every morning, I love this. Every morning we check in with each other to see how we had progressed.
That's awesome.
Rydia is still my favorite Final Fantasy character, which I think is an interesting choice, but okay,
Yeah,
we'll go with it.
I'll allow it.
She's got a great character arc.
She really does. Kind of from where she started to where she is again, avoiding spoilers because I don't want people to
Absolutely.
get that spoiled.
100%.
But I love the whole we check in with each other to see how we progress every morning. That's cool, man.
Man, it just takes me back to the old days of gaming when you didn't really have multiplayer games. At least they weren't very common. And you and your buddy would get a game at the same time, and you'd either be playing it together and you'd like rush over to each other's houses or whatever, and you'd be sitting there working through it together, or that thing, comparing notes like in school between classes or recess or whatever. And yeah.
Because this was pre Zanga, MySpace, and all
That's
that.
Right.
So you had to talk to people face to face.
The internet was not the same creation that it is today.
No, it was not. David Rutledge wrote in and said, it's kind of hard to believe now, but the music and cutscenes made this game feel so cinematic back in the day. I absolutely loved it. Got it for Christmas in 1991 and powered through it in 4 days.
That's crazy. Wow.
That blows my mind.
4 days. That's 4, not a lot of sleep days.
I know. I replied to him, I was like, you didn't get much sleep those 4 days, did you?
That's
I didn't
wild.
get a response back just yet, but that's impressive. My hat's off to you. And then Chris wrote in and said, I am literally just this week getting into Final Fantasy. And he mentioned that it is rumored we might get a new trailer today or later this week, which I don't think we did. I haven't checked really the internet much since.
And that's for Final Fantasy 16, which there have been rumors that supposedly there is a new trailer coming down. Be really interested to see how that looks.
I hope it's good, man.
Me too.
I hope it's good. But one of the things I'm glad is really good is Final Fantasy IV. So Aki, man, you kind of touched on this quite a bit, not quite a bit, but a little bit earlier. But what was your first experience with this game? What did you think of it? What are some things that kind of stood out to you? And I guess this kind of ties into our spoiler-free reviews of the game as well. But man, what was your first experience with Final Fantasy IV like?
So like I said, my first experience with Final Fantasy IV was back with the PlayStation 1 re-release of the game, which was very authentic to the original Super Nintendo version of the game, much like Chrono Trigger, which came in the same collection, with some added cutscenes, which were really interesting. So it was kind of neat to experience the game. It felt like playing a Super Nintendo title on a PlayStation, which was kind of weird. And I thought that the story and the way everything really kicked off, it drew you in really quick. Like there was just, you're playing this character that's conflicted about his missions that he's being given. And you're just like, man, you're wanting him to kind of come to the light, as it were, foreshadowing. But you're wanting him to be saved from the things that he's going through, and you're empathizing with the struggles that he's feeling. And I don't know, it really drew me in right away. At a much younger age, and even more so now, I would say, these days.
Yeah. The kind of what mine is, I agree with that. The way it draws you in so quickly is really well done. And this was technically my first Final Fantasy. Like I remember I'd played Final Fantasy 13 and like I think in high school on my Xbox 360, but I didn't really remember a whole lot about it. I knew Lightning and I think Snow was a character. The one with the beanie. Yeah.
I wouldn't say that 13 wasn't memorable, but it wasn't memorable.
it's about as memorable for the same reasons that Spider-Man 3 is memorable.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. I like it. Okay. Yeah.
Anyway. But I was like, man, I've heard this isn't like traditional Final Fantasy. I want to like play a traditional Final Fantasy, a classic one. And when I where did I play this game first? I can't remember where it was. It was either on my PlayStation Vita or it was something else. Might have been my 3DS. It was one of the two, but I played the original Final Fantasy IV and I was like, this game is incredible. And keep in mind, I played this probably 5 years ago. It's cataloged somewhere in the podcast because I spent 2 months playing Final Fantasy games.
Yeah.
We call it the Dark Ages. And but I remember playing it and just being like, this game is incredible. Like Cecil's an amazing character. Riddy is an amazing character. Kane's an amazing character. Like all the characters are so good.
Very well written, nuanced,
yes. A lot of stuff going on, really heavy themes, which I was surprised by. I didn't know Final Fantasy would get that deep. But I mean, the combat system was great. I loved the way that the sprites looked. The music just really drew me in. Golbez is a really cool looking villain and a very
For sure.
imposing one at the same time. But man, I was like, man, if this is what the classic Final Fantasy games are like, I need to just buy the rest and play through all of them. And then I bought 5, 6, 7, and 8 and jumped into all those. And
Absolutely.
but again, dear listeners, y'all can go into the dark ages, as we call them, of the
The
episodes.
dark ages. I like that.
That was a thing. But yeah, so I mean, that kind of was our spoiler free reviews a little bit of the game, because we could gush about it, which we're about to. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw the spoiler tag out right here. And if you haven't played the game and you don't want it spoiled, you got the pixel remaster sitting on your Steam library or on your phone or tablet or whatever it is. This is your opportunity to pause the show, go play the game, come back later, and we'll get into some spoilers here. So at this point, giving you enough warning. I think Skinner's put in the siren call of the warning thing. So if you're still listening, you don't care about spoilers, or you've played the game and you're ready to talk about Final Fantasy IV. So Aki, dude, there are so many places we could go with this game.
Oh
Because
man.
again, when I first got into this, I didn't realize that this game was going to get as deep as it was, especially with its characters and their struggles and everything. So let's kind of start with where it kicked everything off. Cecil's conflicted at the fact that he was ordered to basically murder anyone standing in his way of the water crystal,
That's
and he's
right.
struggling with that. The game opens up with his troops struggling with that, and then he goes, he takes that signet ring with Kane to Village of the Mist. Come to find out, it's a bomb and it kills everyone. It kills
Yeah.
Rydia's mom,
So
and
it,
it's
it
like,
resonates as he walks into the village. He's like, the ring is glowing. And he's like, what in the world? And all of a sudden, yeah, all the bombs fly out and it
yeah,
wipes out the entire village. And you're like, what?
yeah.
What just happened? And then Rydia's there and it's like, I hate you. And they're like, well, I guess rightfully so.
Yeah, it's like, oh, makes sense.
Man.
Understandable. But yeah, dude, the way that this game opens on such a heavy and really dark tone is something that kind of threw me for a loop. And really that sets the tone for really the whole game, because really the whole game, and maybe I'm wrong about this, it seems like it's a transition of darkness to light, which is
Absolutely.
embodied in Cecil's journey, but you see it just kind of with how the game starts and how the game ends.
And
Dark
the
and
struggle against
lightness.
darkness and the darkness influencing and the temptations, right? And so
Yeah. And so I think that's like it was set up that way, and that's just a big theme of the game, man. So for you getting into it, like what are some things that kind of just stood out to you with that? Could it be with some of the characters or the story, or let's kind of go from there. Let's start talking about some of these themes a little bit.
sure. I really, really, really appreciate Cecil's struggle with dark power versus wanting to turn towards the light and everything. I think that his journey is really interesting and really, really powerful. Watching him roam the lands as a dark knight and doing the king's bidding until he finally realizes this is wrong. This is so contrary to what I believe internally and what I think is right. And rebelling against the king and getting literally basically kicked out of the kingdom, his power stripped, his power in regards to his authority of command of the Red Wings stripped from him, and the new friends that he kind of makes along the way, and all leading up until he gets to Mount Ordeals, which is just, man, what imagery there in
Yeah.
Mount Ordeals. It's just that is a crazy part of the game to me. And we'll touch a little bit more on that a little bit later. But also one of the things I really liked is when he woke Kane up from his brainwashing, and we can dive more into that later on. How Kane talks about how, but I was there the whole time.
Yeah.
He struggled with that guilt, and I relate that sometimes to even my own journey, where I struggle with things of the flesh, for example.
Yeah.
And especially, what you feed is what grows, right? And so the more when I look at seasons of my life where I allowed that to control me, it's like, but I knew better the whole time. Like,
Yeah.
it's very similar to Kane's struggle in that instance, and the
Yeah.
guilt and the burden that he felt afterwards. But those are a couple things that really kind of stand out to me.
Yeah. And those are a lot of things that stand out to me too, because I think what makes this game so special is that we all can relate to at least one or two of these characters at any one moment in the game. Kind of like with Cecil and Kane for you. Um, I found myself as I was playing through it again relating to Tella a little bit. Not that someone, was responsible for my daughter's death. I don't have kids,
Right.
but I was like, I know what it feels like to kind of have those emotions where you want revenge and you want justice so bad that you're willing to kind of take it into your hands, almost to your own detriment. Thankfully I didn't go to the top of a mountain and learn a spell and try to use it, but I understood kind of where Tella was coming from more now than what I did, years ago when I played it. And I was like, man, I get it. I understand it. And when I revisited that moment with Kane, when he's released from the brainwashing because Tella uses Meteor on Golbez, I was like, dude, this reminds me so much of like Winter Soldier from Captain America.
Oh man.
And I was just
Yeah.
like, dude, it's the same kind of thing, but Final Fantasy did it first. And man, so let's get into it, because I think what's interesting about all these characters is when you meet them, they all have their own struggles or pains that they're dealing with. Cecil is dealing with his own confliction over the orders he did and the actions he did. Um, then you have Rydia, who's dealing with the loss of her mom, who, when she learns how to use fire, it's almost like everyone's telling her to get over it. And I'm like, this is not the way to tell someone who's mourning to just,
Yeah, it's like, oh, it's fine. Just move on. Forget your mom. Like, no big
it's like,
deal. What?
it's like, we need you to
He's a
learn
little
fire.
kid.
Which is another crazy thing to remember, is like, Rydia's a little kid. She's probably a teenager, at the
Absolutely.
oldest. And so, but all that to say, you have Tella kind of mourning the loss of his daughter. You have Edward, who's mourning the loss of Tella's daughter because they were together, and
Yep.
he feels responsible for it. Who later gets sick, and he's like, I still need to help out. There's that guilt there. You have Kane dealing with guilt throughout the entire game. So, man, what do you think this game has to say about not just what we deal with as people, but how we engage other people as a whole?
I think it's beautiful to watch the characters comfort each other while sticking true to their own convictions. And going back to the scene with Cecil and Mount Ordeals, how he has to, when he becomes a paladin, right? When he
Mm-hmm.
becomes a paladin, he has to actually fight his darkness, his dark
Yeah.
self, right? Like there's that conflict, and I love that dichotomy there between the light and the darkness, and how we're always going to be at struggle against our inner darkness. And watching that play out was really cool. But just watching the characters kind of be there for each other, and especially when we get to themes of like sacrifice, there's so much sacrifice in this game. The first one, I think, and I might be wrong here, but the first one I think was Palom and Porum, who were literally sent to spy on Cecil, turned into being his friends,
Yeah.
right? And then sacrificing themselves, turning themselves into literal statues to prevent the walls from crushing the party. Which is crazy to see that happen. And obviously several other characters sacrifice themselves in one shape, form, or fashion. Sid, Tella, obviously, even like Fusoya and Golbez towards the end of the game, right?
Yeah.
Turn around and see some redemption and sacrifice. So it's really interesting.
Yeah. And I think that's what I love about this game, is that maybe the whole theme, well, I mean, the part of a major theme of the game is darkness versus light,
Sure.
but it's also interweaving in redemption for a lot of these characters. And I don't know, like, I think that's just what stood out to me so much about this game, is that you have these characters who are dealing with these things that start off at one point but are totally different by the end. And it just, that's what I loved about it, is that it felt so human. Like it gave you the message of like, you may have started out as one thing in life or at one point in your life, but you can be something else by the end. And I'm like, this is like, what other video game in 1991 was dealing with these heavy themes and giving people a message
Absolutely.
of hope to a degree? And it's interesting that you brought up the Mount of Ordeals thing with Cecil, because that is one of my favorite moments in gaming. And
Yeah.
I must have not have played this game to the degree that I thought I did when I first played it. Because when I was playing through the remaster, I was going through the town that you get to before you go to the Mount of Ordeals. And I was like, I'm going to talk to people and see what they say. Everyone is mean to you. And they either say like you need to leave or you're a horrible person or like people like you could never become a paladin. Like it's not going to happen. And then you go and you do that. And what blew my mind is when you fight yourself, there's a point where this voice comes in and says, a true knight or paladin would sheath his sword. And I'm like, in 1991, they're switching things up. Instead of you attacking it, it's telling you to just stop attacking to finish out the fight. And I'm like, that's so cool because you never would have thought of that in the game. And then when you go back down to the town and you talk to people, everyone's like, oh, wow, you really did it. Wow, congratulations. I didn't think there was anyone good enough to become a paladin. And I'm just like, again, it goes back to the whole theme of redemption. Cecil
Absolutely.
gets it. And in a way, I screen capped the moment when you get that paladin, you become a paladin and you have your sword and it says break from your past and overcome the darkness. Only then will you receive the holy power.
Yeah.
And I'm
Which is
like,
crazy.
it's so
What video game in
crazy.
1991? What video game now would have that message, you know?
Well, and that's what I was trying to think of. I was like, what modern game is sharing this deep of a message on redemption to people now? And I couldn't really think of one. And I mean, that's not to say that, people aren't trying to make games that have that message in it
Sure.
now,
Of course not.
but it's just, there's none that I can think of that are as profound as this one, if
For
that makes
sure.
sense.
And I mean,
And so,
that theme has been around through multiple Final Fantasies, to be honest. There have been lots of Final Fantasies where characters that maybe were against you at one point or you thought were actually evil turn around and have, sometimes it's really small redemption arcs, but I think even back to like Final Fantasy 12 and Captain Bosch von Rossenberg's brother, like the whole
yeah,
story and everything that happens with him. Like, I mean, I'm not going to get into details here because that's spoilers too, but
right.
it's really interesting to see that repeated throughout Final Fantasy history, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah. And I could even think of like how Cloud even has that going on
Absolutely,
with him as you get
100%.
into that game. But ah, it's so good, dude. I love this game. It's
A great
um
game. It's a great franchise.
so let's get into something here because this is a spoiler for the game itself. Um and it kind of threw me for a loop. I'm gonna be honest, it was pretty jarring.
Sure.
The moment when you have to go to the moon.
Oh, by the way, surprise! You're not originally from this planet. Like what?
Yeah, like you find out Cecil's a what is it, a Luminarian or a
Yeah,
Lunarian,
Lunarian. Yeah.
which are a race of like celestial beings and not quite like angels, so to speak, but kind of live on the moon to a
Right.
degree.
Yeah.
Like, did that throw you off as much as it did me when it was revealed?
That it definitely threw me, even though like it had been kind of alluded to, there was like legends and stuff being talked about. That didn't throw me as much as some of the other revelations, but because oh man, this is I don't want to get into it just yet. I'll save that for a little bit. But anyway,
Okay.
it definitely threw me that because this is the first Final Fantasy, right, where it's like, oh, we're going to the moon.
Yeah. Surprise.
You're from the moon. Surprise. I knew your dad. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So
It-
yeah,
it-
it's crazy.
yeah. And I think the other thing that didn't really make it any better for me when I found that out was when you get to the moon, it feels like the game spikes in difficulty, or at least it did for me, because you come
Absolutely.
across, oh, I'm blanking on the name. This enemy is in almost just about every game. It's the one that has the horns and it's like a wolf type thing. It's not a behemoth. I don't think it's a behemoth.
There is a behemoth though, and that one that it does look like a wolf and it has horns and it's purple.
Okay, that is what I'm thinking about.
It's the
Because
behemoth, yeah, and
yeah,
it's a staple of Final Fantasy.
you first
Actually,
encounter it on the moon, and it just, at least for me, when I first encountered it, it wiped my whole
hits
party,
like
and
a
I was
truck.
like,
Hits like a truck. I mean, here's a
yeah,
common trope and issue with not even just Final Fantasy but JRPGs in general. Is you'll be going through the game, tra la 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 la. There's this unexpected section where they expect you to grind and level, but it's not
yep,
clearly communicated. And then you walk into the next area and it's like boom, and you're like, what just happened?
yep. Oh
Yeah.
man, yep. I remember exactly that moment when it was like that for Final Fantasy VI as well. And
Yeah. In Final Fantasy
yeah,
VII, when you go into the final area of the game, the meteor
yes,
crater or whatever, and it's just,
yep,
why am I fighting these black dragons that are doing so much damage all of a sudden?
yep.
Anyway,
Oh man, why? This is a bit of a side note, but why do you think that is in JRPGs? Why is there a moment where the difficulty just spikes up out of nowhere almost?
I don't want to say poor game design, but I mean, it's a trope, right? And I feel like they
Yeah,
just kind of left it that way, and just that's how it is. And I don't know. It's one of those things where I wish there was a way to gently communicate. You should probably be level 50 before you walk into this zone. Like, I
yeah,
mean, they do that in MMOs, but obviously
yeah,
those are a little bit different. So
yeah. Man, yeah, it's rough. So those of you that are still listening now who have either played the game know exactly what we're talking about, or if you haven't played
absolutely.
it and you don't really care about spoilers, just know if you do play it, before you get to the moon, you probably want to grind for a little bit.
Yeah, it even happened
Otherwise,
in Final Fantasy 1. Like in Final Fantasy 1, when you get to like the final area of the game and you're transported back to the past, all of a sudden the difficulty goes whoop, and you're like, "Why is everything I thought I was fine. I was fine before this point. What happened?"
well, I will keep that in mind then.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you said there's a few other things that kind of caught you off guard. What were some of those other things besides Cecil being a moon man and going to the moon?
Smacking Yang with a frying pan.
Wait, say that one more time. Smacking who?
Yang, he's the monk, right? He's the leader. I don't. Oh man, I'm blanking on the nation now, right? But he's the monk that you meet.
Fabul.
Yeah, yeah. He's the monk, and he's another character that sacrifices himself, right?
Hmm.
There's a side quest where you meet his wife, and she says, "Take this frying pan and whack my husband upside the head with it."
I don't think I found that one.
Oh, you got to go find it. It's hilarious. Oh my goodness.
So you take a frying pan, you just whack
You
Yang
literally
upside the head
walk,
with
and
it.
he's like laying in bed sick, and you whack him with the frying pan, and it fixes him, and he's suddenly I just don't get it. It's just hilarious. Oh my goodness! But some of the humor that they injected into this game, is particularly through some of the side quests, is tremendous, especially in light of some of the heavier themes. Like we said, characters literally are sacrificing themselves for other members of the party, and the themes of light against darkness, and then you smacking somebody with a frying pan. So yeah,
Oh my gosh. I'm gonna look for that then because I'm like I said, I'm playing through the Pixel remaster now, and so
absolutely.
I'm gonna go look for it. I didn't realize this game was more like Dragon Ball Z than I had originally imagined. Oh man, that's wild. So I gotta know, out of all the characters, as we kind of start landing the plane here a little bit, who. So let's do this. Who is one of your favorite characters in this game and why?
I would say Kane. And I feel like that's probably a pretty common answer, but just specifically, the guilt that he struggled with for his past actions, even though he wasn't necessarily fully responsible for them. I just kind of relate it to my own personal journey and just lingering guilt for some decisions that I've made in the past, and things that just kind of you carry with you forward, right? You're trying to
Yeah,
live right, you're trying to do the right thing, but that still kind of haunts you a little bit.
yeah,
So, but Kane would definitely be a really, really character that I identify strongly with.
yeah, man. I think I'd be right there with you. I think first of all, Cecil's one of my favorite characters in all of gaming, just
Sure,
because he's such a cool character. His progression as a character and just that message of hope that he brings is
absolutely.
really really cool. But I also really like Kane as well, and part of that is because of the whole Winter Soldier thing. And I'm gonna get a little misty eyed thinking about this because it's a really awesome picture. I remember in Captain America Civil War when towards the end Captain America and Bucky are flying to confront I can't even remember, is it, I think it's Baron Zemo is the
Yeah, yeah,
bad guy.
yeah. They're headed into Bulgaria, wherever he is. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And they're talking and Bucky's kind of like showing remorse over all of his actions and how he was like
yeah,
cognizant for all of it. And he says something to Steve about how like am I even worth saving or can I even be saved? And I remember sitting there in the movie theater and watching that and just like almost wanting to bawl because I felt so bad for him in that moment. And I'm like, I know what that feels like, you know?
Absolutely.
And of course, as we do here at TRG, we like to bring the gospel into some things. That's what I thought of when I was watching the movie. I thought of the gospel and how Jesus would say, absolutely, you are worth saving.
Yeah.
And when I play through this again and see Cain dealing with that same dilemma, it's like, you are absolutely worth saving. You've done
Yeah.
some pretty jacked up things, but dude, you are worth saving. And for us in the real world, not a pixel world or a film, we know that through Jesus, we are absolutely worth being saved. And that's what he did on the cross for all
Amen.
of us. And so I think maybe that's why I like Final Fantasy IV so much, is because it might be one of the most Christian video games ever made,
Which
next
is
to Doom.
crazy. Which is
Yeah.
crazy. Next to Doom. You're not
Yep.
wrong. You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Yep. So, but it's just Final Fantasy IV, man. It's one of those games I highly recommend to people because it tells an amazing story, and one that I think we all can relate with to a degree, whether you're a
Absolutely.
Christian or not. And so, Aki, man, as we kind of start landing the plane on this section here, are there any final thoughts you have about Final Fantasy IV?
When it comes to Final Fantasy games, if you haven't experienced some of these older titles, I know there's lots of ways that you can play these games. There was a 3D remake, all of those things. If you haven't authentically experienced it, pixel remasters are the way to go.
Yep.
And you will not be disappointed. You will not be
Yep.
disappointed.
I would heartily second that because, like I said, as I've been playing it on the iPad and I've been playing it on Steam too. I mean, if you have a PC with Steam, play it there if you can. But if you all of you have is your phone, play it on there as well. I will warn you that if you are like me and you care about keeping track of your time in the game, quick save and then close the game out. Don't leave it suspended because it will keep counting your time.
Absolutely.
And as of the time of this recording, I have like close to 60 hours put into it on iOS. I've only played it for maybe 15 hours, but you live and learn, I guess.
Funny how
That's
that
what it is.
works.
It is funny how that works. So if anyone's looking, I don't think anyone really checks their game center on iOS, but in case you have, and you're like, man, Logan's putting some serious work into this game, I can assure you, I
Not
have
that much work.
not that much, but yeah. So, Aki, man, let me start out with this. Dear listeners, for those of you that listen to this discussion, if you have any thoughts about Final Fantasy IV, or really Final Fantasy in general, feel free to share those with us on our social media platforms. Links to all of them will be in your show notes. And Aki, man, thank you for joining me on this episode of the Reformed Gamers, man. It was good to, one, finally have you on, but also, well, no, I don't know what I was thinking. Yeah, it was good to have you on.
Dude, I was just such an honor to be able to be here, and I love your podcast, and I'm so
Thanks, man.
thankful to be able to participate. And it's been an honor and a privilege.
Yeah, man. Well, speaking of honor and privileges, and I guess things that don't really have much to do with it now that I think about it, we got to do the recos, man. These are some things that you would
Absolutely.
recommend to our listeners to go check out. What are some recos that our dear listeners should check out?
Dune, the new movie that was just released. It's available obviously in theaters and HBO Max. When we're talking about themes of light and darkness, Dune is like the grandfather or the granddaddy of modern sci-fi, right? Like it inspired so many things from Star Wars and lots of other awesome franchises. But this movie is a very faithful adaptation of about half of the book. Obviously, in the title card of the movie, it says it's part one. And part two has been confirmed. They have greenlit part two. They are going to start filming it. I think it's 2023 is the release window that they're looking at right now.
Okay.
But I thoroughly enjoyed it. I will say, if you are not familiar at all with Dune or the mythos or any of it, maybe brush up a little bit before you go into it, because they don't really treat it as noob friendly. It's definitely for people who are fans of the franchise as a whole. I haven't yet, but I have it downloaded. I want to replay through Westwood Studios, who did the Command and Conquer series. They did a Dune real-time strategy game back in the day.
Cool.
Yeah, I loved it. I loved it when I was a kid. So I actually downloaded. There's modders and all that stuff have updated it for modern platforms. So I'm hoping to dive into it soon. But also Destiny 2, the Witch Queen expansion is coming very, very soon. And I have put that there for you because I know you're excited about it too. But the updates that they're making to the way that weapons are going to be working and the classes and just like everything is, oh man, the light classes rework and everything. And I'm really, really excited for the future of Destiny at this point because this season
Yeah,
has been
man.
amazing. The story's in a really great place, and it's really going to be exciting to see where Bungie takes it next.
Yeah, the stuff that they've done with the story, I'll echo that. Has been this is the best storytelling Destiny has ever seen,
100%.
and
Absolutely.
it's so good. I need to actually. I've been. It's funny every time I power on my PS5 or get on my computer, Destiny's just sitting there staring at me. I'm like, I need to get back into this game.
It's so good. I'm finally
So
able to do things other than Vault of Glass. My entire fire team finally has Vex Mythoclast now, so I can move on and we can like start
yes,
doing other things.
that's such a good game. How long did it take y'all to grind that out to get everyone one of
So
those?
I had 3 of them drop before the last guy, my buddy. He's actually my cousin Steven. It took 46 tries last night, and
Oh
we
my
ran it.
gosh.
We ran it all 3 times, and on the 3rd run, it finally dropped.
Oh man. Well,
Oh man,
nicely done.
yeah,
I know how that feels because in my old clan when we were running Vault of Glass pretty regularly, we were all trying
sure.
to get Vex Mythoclast. And they pulled me in one night and they're like, watch, Logan's gonna like wind up getting one before all of us. And I got 2 that night that we ran it and no one else got one. And I almost got kicked out of my
Banned
clan.
forever.
Yep. So I know how those roles go, but that's part
Oh
of the fun of
man,
Destiny, man. So
it
I'm
is.
hoping hopefully I'll be able to join y'all here pretty soon
We'd
because
love to
that'll
have you.
be awesome. As far as my recos are, again, y'all continue praying for my wife and I's adoption. If you guys want to get some sick beanies or ear warmers, let me know because my wife is making those. Or if you want a sweet new profile pic for your Twitter or you need some design work done, hit me up. Because if you follow me on Twitter, you've already seen some of the stuff I've done with some neon and paint brushes and it's fun
You've got
stuff.
some serious skills, dude. Like it looks
Thanks,
so
man.
good.
Thanks, man. I don't think a lot of people know this about me, but like my undergrad is in graphic design.
I had
So
no idea, but man, it's
yeah,
really obvious watching some of the stuff you've pumped out, dude. It
yeah,
looks
dude.
so good.
I used to do it a lot, and then when I went to seminary, I kind of stopped doing it, and now I'm glad that my new teaching job has kind of brought me back into it in full force. And I'm like, dude, this is so much fun. So
Super awesome.
it's been fun to see people's reactions. My other reco is going to be, well, Aki already mentioned this. Try out one of the Pixel remasters. I'm going to recommend you go check out Aki's Twitch channel, his content, and hang out with him. Follow him on Twitter. Again, links to all that stuff will be in your show notes. So be sure to give him a follow, hang out in his chat. Like he does a really good stream, like really, really high quality, a lot of fun, high energy, and a lot of good stuff. And I think if you get there during a Mama Peach sneak attack, those
Oh
are
boy.
always fun.
Oh
Those are
boy.
fun. Maybe not for Aki, but they're fun for everybody else.
Yeah, that's right.
But anyway, dear listeners, again, thank you for listening to this episode of The Reformed Gamers. As always, if you like what you hear, if you like what we do, you can support us over on Patreon, patreon.com/The Reformed Gamers. Gets you early uncut access to all episodes like this one and behind the scenes content and more. So head over to Patreon. Link will be in your show notes. As always, if you want more TRG content, you can go to our website, thereformedgamers.com, which has links to our YouTube channel, our social media accounts, our Discord server. We'd love to connect with you and get to know you a little bit more and have you join the TRG community and at least on YouTube, help you out with Metroid Dread because that's, like I said, that seems to be the only content I'm producing these days on YouTube. So it is what it is. But yeah, Aki, again, man, thank you for joining us on this episode, man. We need to get you back on for future Final Fantasy installments.
I'd love it, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man. Well, dear listeners, with that being said, thank you for listening to this episode. Be a deer, keep it locked here, and we'll see you in the next episode.